Welcome to Restorative Yoga and Stories of Resilience. For this session, we will focus on the story of Patrul Rinpoche and the Medicine Buddha Mantra. The Medicine Buddha Mantra, sometimes called Sangye Menla, is a beautiful mantra that could be used not only as a helpful reminder to focus on what matters most, but it is also a long enough mantra to where your exhales could be inspired to be just a little longer than usual. So it's good for a breathing technique called Dirgha Sukshma Pranayama. It can be very calming and empowering. So if you'd like to learn the mantra, then consider singing with me. The mantra is not too long. It starts off with the honorific Tadyata by example. If you wish the world to be a better place, then the best way to go about that is to be the change you wish to see. Lead by example. The head of the mantra is Om. As you may know, Om in the context of yoga is referring to the ideal way that we wish to be in this world. And the heart of the mantra is Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, which is the three spheres of being a healer for yourself, because no one else can do that for you. That's your responsibility. To be a healer for others, as one of the best ways that you can be a healer for yourself is to help create a supportive and protective atmosphere for the people around you. And Maha Bekanze, to be a healer for everyone, to be a healer for your community, for friends of friends, and even future generations. So that's the heart of this mantra, Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze. The legs of the mantra is Ranza Samungate Suha. Ranza is a Tibetan pronunciation of the Sanskrit Raja, which means royal, regal. Samungate is referring to one who has gone beyond the cycle of suffering, literally what is meant by nirvana. So we're speaking of the Buddha here. And Soha means an offering, relinquish of attachment. So the legs of this mantra is referring to the heart, being a healer for yourself, for others in your community, but without grasping to results, as a pure offering. Like the Buddha, who went beyond the cycle of suffering. That's the mantra itself. It happens to be short enough to where you could memorize it. Tadyata Om Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, Ranza Samungate Suha. But long enough to where it might inspire you to breathe a little slower and longer. So feel free to sing this mantra with me. And then you can maybe use it to guide your breaths to be a little slower and longer as we move into our restorative practice. Tadyata Om Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, Ranza Samungate Suha. Tadyata Om Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, Ranza Samungate Suha. Tadyata Om Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, Ranza Samungate Suha. Tadyata Om Bekanze, Bekanze, Maha Bekanze, Ranza Samungate Suha. Tadyata. Bekanze, Beganze, beganze, maha beganze, ranza zanga tezuha. When you're ready to begin in our first restorative posture, I'll recommend that you utilize a bolster and a blanket, as well as a wall. The wall will come in handy a couple times in our sequence tonight, but hopefully right from the get-go. The bolster will go about an inch away from the wall, granted that you want to have the elevation of your pelvis a little higher than your heart. And the blanket can go where your head is as a support for your head. The easiest way to get into this pose, called Viparita Karani Mudra, is to sit on the edge of the bolster, your tailbone touching the wall, and then to come down onto your shoulder and roll over onto your back. So that way you end up in the middle of your bolster, close enough to the wall where you can relax your legs. It could just turn out that you're lucky enough to fall right into a good space automatically. You can just relax here for the next 8 minutes. But in the event that you need to make an adjustment, feel free to push your heels into the wall and either pull the bolster towards you so you can sink your tailbone between the bolster and the wall for an anterior tilt, or scooch away from the wall for a posterior tilt. The blanket underneath your head is optional, but if you roll it up, it could serve as an extra support for the cervical spine. While you're getting settled here, I'll encourage you to elongate your exhales, but without pushing the breath. Just let the breath come and go on its own, but see if you can let it be longer by removing any obstruction that would prevent you from enjoying, or at least allowing your exhales to be complete. Same with the inhales, allow them to be a little bit longer, but subtler and softer. In restorative yoga, this is a breathing technique called Dirgha Sukshma Pranayama, long and gentle. Feel free to sing that melody of the Medicine Buddha mantra in the back of your mind to help slow down your inhales or exhales every now and then. In addition to the long, gentle breathing, try to bring your attention inside of your body and release any tension that you might find from your feet all the way down to your hands and your face, from your head all the way back to your feet. Try to send wave after wave of the relaxation signal to your whole body in a continuous flow till there's nothing left to let go of. Keep washing your body in relaxation so you continue the long, gentle breath. While you continue to rest here, I will play that mantra one more time and then begin to tell you the story of Patrul Rinpoche, to whom this melody for the Medicine Buddha mantra is attributed. Tadita om bekanze bekanze maha bekanze ranza sangate suha. Tadita om bekanze Patrul Rinpoche was born in 1808 in a province of Tibet called Kham, in a nomadic tribe. From an early age, he was recognized as the reincarnation or emanations of some pretty profound figures, and had a pretty strong memory, so began to memorize the Dharma of Buddhism quite easily. And at a fairly young age, engaged in a 3-month, 3-day retreat in a cave, specifically with the deity Yamantaka, also known as Bhairava, the Frightener. And he said, upon at least one occasion, that it was in this retreat where he had a profound awakening, where he recognized that his self was as vast as space itself. We have an ordinary sense of self that is usually around the shape of our body, which you are welcome to continue sending waves of relaxation to in a continuous flow, along with the breath that can not only be soothing, but also tends to cross this boundary of that ordinary, familiar sense of self called asmita. In a deep state of meditation, he came to the realization that his true self, or his genuine self, is as vast as space itself. He went on to become a very educated, erudite monk that was revered and often given prestigious positions in monasteries as a teacher. And early on in his life, he accepted these invitations, and basically at the height of the ivory towers of education in Tibet, enjoyed the quality of life that was offered to such privileged monks who were given the best food, the best clothing, and the best quarters to live in, even though it somewhat contradicted the point of becoming a monastic servant in the first place. But at a certain point in his life, he changed his mind about this, and he renounced the norms of his day. And he, though offered many prestigious and very comforting opportunities to teach in a monastery, he chose to continue roaming the world as a vagabond, as a nomad, with nothing but the clothes on his back, and reportedly a copy of a book called the Bodhisattva Charavatara. He was often invited to continue teaching at monasteries, but he would often show up looking like a homeless person and without any entourage or possessions. It was hard to tell who Patrul Rinpoche was until you heard him talk, and then you're like, whoa. So that's just a little bit about Patrul Rinpoche. There are many stories of his life where people encountered him and his way of viewing things that changed them fundamentally for the better. So I'll hone in on just a couple stories about his life that inspired people, and perhaps even his take on the medicine Buddha mantra. But for now, you've been in this pose for 8 minutes, which is just a taste of what it has to offer. You're welcome to stay here longer or come back to this posture anytime you want. When you're ready to come down though, feel free to continue the long, gentle breathing and concentration of attention within the shape of your body. But please bend your knees and gradually roll over to one side before you sit up. If you place your bolster underneath your pelvis to elevate your seat above your knees, you can join me in what's called Sukhasana. You're even welcome to put the blanket underneath your ankles for a little cushion. But as you're getting upright, give yourself a moment to get acclimated and consider just moving your spine from side to side to improve circulation to every joint. So instead of just moving like a metronome, sending waves from the tailbone to the crown, and just do this for a minute. Not clenching or tensing any of your muscles, just playfully sending waves back and forth. The goal of these spinal waves is to restore mobility in every joint of the spine. You don't want to be hypermobile where there's too much mobility, could cause injury, or hypomobile where there's not enough mobility that can cause degeneration, but just good old-fashioned mobility. Now we'll do something similar front to back. Perhaps you can see it easier from the profile. It's basically just sending waves from the tailbone to the crown. So do this for a minute. If there's anything that's painful, then please don't make it worse, but if you just are patient and do this enough times, you can restore mobility in every joint. And now for rotation, instead of macroscopic rotations, clockwise, see what you can do to place your head above your tailbone and basically do subtler rotation. So like a spiral from the tailbone to the crown, both clockwise and anti-clockwise for about a minute. Feel free to switch directions at any point. So if you have any percussive sounds that your spine is making, just try to relax and go slowly. Try not to tense your muscles. Just playfully move in this same familiar path over and over again. Cool. Now our next restorative pose is going to go a little bit more into the spine. So you're welcome to put the blanket aside for now and the bolster, and perhaps just come into the table pose for a few cat-cows. If you walk your hands forward, just a little bit more than your shoulders, shoulder distance apart, your knees and feet hips width apart. You can drop your belly on the inhales and lift your chin, what's called the cow stretch. So you're compressing everything on the back but lengthening the front, and then round your back and tuck your chin into your chest, what's called the cat stretch. And just go back and forth a couple more times to the length of your long, dirgha, but gentle, unrushed breath. Sukshma. Consider also concentrating your attention in your body with the intention to release tension. So the next posture is the child's pose. In restorative yoga, it's sometimes called the fountain of youth. So you bring your seat to your heels and attempt to rest your head slightly lower than your heart. And this doesn't necessarily require props. I mean, your mat is a prop. You could basically round your spine over your thighs like this, which will basically make your spine round like a cow. I mean, like a cat. If, however, having your thighs parallel is uncomfortable, move your knees apart some, maybe even your feet, so you're creating space. That will create the absence of obstruction, and your spine will lay a little bit more flat or round down like a cow. As we're going to be holding this for a few minutes, this could get uncomfortable on your knees or your ankles. You're welcome to put the bolster underneath your seat, which will take some of the pressure off of the knees. You could also put a blanket underneath the knees or the ankles if you think that would help. You can totally change your mind about this and do this 5 minutes in the pose if you want, but set things up so well that you can let go of all the tension in your body in this shape and continue dirgha sukshma, long, gentle breathing. On one occasion, this is one of many stories about Patrul Rinpoche, he apparently encountered a person that he had taught the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and it profoundly transformed his experience, that he became a much more generous person after this and went from being stricken with poverty to becoming fairly wealthy. And when he saw Patrul Rinpoche, he wanted to express his gratitude by offering Patrul Rinpoche a very expensive golden statue. He said, "I've been waiting for years to give this to you." And then he gave it to Patrul Rinpoche. And he just put everything into practice that he had learned about generosity, specifically dana paramita, the perfection of generosity, where you make a pure offering without any strings attached, no attachments. Basically, I just want you to have this, and it doesn't matter if you don't thank me or whatever you do with it, I'm not attached, just here you go. So he did that, and it felt so good to reward someone who had bestowed not just any kindness, but a great kindness, by teaching him how to perfect generosity. Patrul Rinpoche, he received the gift, shared a blissful moment with the person, and then they went their separate ways. And the next day, the wealthy businessman saw a child walking around with this very expensive statue that he had just given to Patrul Rinpoche in his hand. And he was like, "Whoa, kid, where did you get this?" And the child said that he had found it in a field. He said that there was this old man that had it, and he said that it was poison. And he threw it on the ground, and he spit, and then he continued walking. So the wealthy businessman let the boy keep the very expensive statue, but assumed that it was Patrul Rinpoche that he was talking about. And even though he seemed so delighted to receive his gift at the time he gave it to him, he tried his best to understand why he later thought it was poison and threw it on the ground and walked away from it. Sometimes even when we think we're making a pure offer, a pure gift without any strings attached, we might still have hidden expectations that we're not aware of. Just one more minute here in the Fountain of Youth. The restorative version of Child's Pose has many Any variations? When you're ready to rise up from the child's pose, doesn't have to be now, but when the time comes, consider coming back into the table posture. Setting the bolster aside might be required. And just a couple more cat-cows. Consider rounding your back like a cat gently on the exhales. Dropping your belly and lifting your chin on the inhales. Pressing into your fingers and then your palms, claws to paws for a good foundation. And then maybe, as you strengthen your upper body briefly, reach your right heel back with the toes still on the ground to release the tension in the backs of your legs. You can cat-cow just the pelvis. Please switch legs at your leisure. These movements that we're doing in between postures are just trying to help prepare you for the next pose. So when you're ready for our next restorative posture, please bring the bolster onto your mat again. And I'll recommend the blanket as a pillow at the top of your bolster. So you can keep it in the standard fold or double up as needed. We're going to come into the sleeping butterfly. Supta Baddha Konasana is best done not with your back right up against the bolster, but maybe a block width away. So when you lie down on the bolster, your upper back and your head end up on the bolster, but your lower back has the freedom to adjust. So sometimes you need more of a posterior tilt. If that's the case, try moving further away from the bolster. Sometimes you need more of an anterior tilt like a cow. If that's the case, move towards the bolster. Try to find the tilt that allows your lower back to relax. The soles of your feet together will elicit an opening in the inner thigh region for most people. You can play around with this though by moving your feet a little further out or closer in for nuance. If that's altogether too much or painful for your knees, just try placing one foot in front of the other, and that will allow the knees to at some point come to the ground. If everything you've tried doesn't work, you can't relax, then you're welcome to straighten one leg or both legs in the sleeping caterpillar. For your upper body, allow your arms to basically be about 45 degrees from the bolster and maybe tuck one shoulder blade at a time towards the middle. Palms up usually works the best. Once you feel like you've got your posture where you want it, please continue long, gentle breathing. And continue to shower your body in rest and relaxation by sending the relaxation signal in a continuous flow till you feel like you can just let go. So Patrul Rinpoche gathered quite the reputation of being not just an educated monk, but being somewhat of a trendsetter in that he walked the walk and chose a lifestyle that made some of the other monks feel self-conscious about. his argument to live like a homeless person, a vagabond, never knowing where he was going to sleep next, was that was what he swore to do when he took monks' vows, to be a servant to others. And though it appears that the time that he lived, that the education institutions of the monastery was a widely accepted way to be of service, he said that when he had accepted those positions, he was too far removed from the people that he had vowed to serve, and that he would be more helpful to them, appearing as just an average person. On one particular occasion, Patrul Rinpoche was invited to speak at a monastery several days away, and as he was walking there, he encountered a woman with a couple children who was walking in the same direction. Being that she was alone with children made her somewhat vulnerable, but he didn't want to scare her, so he decided to walk on the opposite side of the road as she. And after quite some time, she eventually just looked over at him and asked, "Well, if you're going to walk in the same direction as I am, can you please help me with these kids?" So Patrul Rinpoche decided that he would go over and help carry one of the children and give the woman some relief. And turns out that they were walking to the same town, but not necessarily for the same reason. She had been widowed and chose to live a life that was unknown rather than do what was accepted at the time and continue on as a servant to her in-laws. So rather than the familiar, she chose the unfamiliar. Just fairly brave of her. One can deduce why she may have done that. Patrul Rinpoche, though he was, full of good advice and insight, he just listened to her and didn't try to tell her how to live or anything, just rather gave her an opportunity to talk out her frustrations, her challenges, and gave her an adult set of ears that would listen to her and validate what she was going through. This helped her feel better. When they finally made it to their destination, before she got to the place that she was heading towards, she thanked Patrul Rinpoche. And feeling overwhelmed being in this brand new town that she had never been to and having no connections, she wondered if he might help her find a place to stay. And then she remembered that this guy was homeless. And it just occurred to her as she said it out loud, like, oh, how can I ask a homeless person for a place to stay? And she just said, thank you. But Patrul Rinpoche said, meet me behind the monastery at 3 p.m. and I'll offer you some help. So it turns out that people from all over had gathered to attend a teaching on the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life on this occasion from Patrul Rinpoche. And there was this big long line of people waiting to get into the monastery to find their seat. And all of them had lined up with this offering that they were going to make Patrul Rinpoche. See, Patrul Rinpoche had a reputation of not accepting a gift. So when someone made an offering of a statue or a picture or a book or some sort of jewel, he would accept the offering and allow them to collect the good karma of making the offering. But then because he himself practiced non-possessiveness, he would give the item right back to the person. So if he were making the offering, that made you collect the good karma of giving something valuable to a high teacher like Patrul Rinpoche. Plus, you got to walk away with the gift afterwards because he didn't actually want it. He just wanted you to collect the good karma. So many people had done this and basically would have that trinket and put it on their mantle, and then it would be a conversation piece whenever they had people over for dinner. They'd say, "This was a gift that I gave to Patrul Rinpoche, and he gave it back to me." And that just made it even more valuable. So Patrul Rinpoche just happened to walk up to this line, and instead of waiting his turn, he cut in front of everybody and went right to the throne at the top of the stairs that gave entrance to the monastery. People were upset that this homeless guy wasn't following the rules. Some of them had been waiting there for hours. But the abbot of the monastery recognized that this was not an ordinary homeless man. And when they saw him get right to the top, they bowed and greeted him and helped him onto the throne. This changed the demeanor of everyone and how they felt about this homeless person when they found out that that was the person that they were waiting for hours to see. The offerings began. People were walking up with their statue or their valuable gift and offering it to Patrul Rinpoche. And turns out that instead of getting the good karma they expected, plus the gift that they were given back to them, they got a lesson in non-attachment. As they gave Patrul Rinpoche the gift, he took it and he said, "Oh, thank you so much." And although they were waiting for him to give back what they had given, he kept it. He just put it down next to the throne and said, "Next." People were somewhat traumatized that they were actually giving away this very expensive and important thing that they were giving, not just ritualistically, but for real. And one after one, the pile of gifts started to accumulate. And that's when Patrul Rinpoche told one of the monks from the monastery to please take this pile of gifts and bring it to the back of the monastery at 3 p.m. There's going to be a woman with 2 kids there, and to please give it to her. So that's a cool story about Patrul Rinpoche and his ardent non-possessiveness. If your feet are still together with your knees apart in the sleeping butterfly, then please consider bending them at this time. Allowing them to straighten one at a time. And maybe for just a few seconds, consider bringing your arms over your head and stretching your hands away from your feet. When you're ready to, kindly roll over to one side and find your way back up to a comfortable seat. The next posture that we're going to do is going to involve just a little bit of an opening here on the outer hip. So while you're in this comfortable upright seat, consider placing your feet about as wide as your mat, hands behind you. I'll show you the profile. And moving your knees from side to side, just gently in the windshield wiper. Try not to clench or tense your muscles too much. So I've shown you the profile for legs at the wall, Viparita Karani Mudra, with a bolster. Now I'll ask you to just use the blanket underneath your pelvis. And this time I'll show you a different angle. It's the same entrance though. So sit on the edge of the blanket with your tailbone touching the wall. And bring your shoulder down and roll over onto your back. So you end up close enough to the wall where you can rest your legs, but in the middle of the blanket. As you're getting settled here, try to scoot away a couple of inches so that you might be somewhere around 4 to 6 inches away from the wall. Allow your pelvis the freedom to tilt from front to back, forward like a cow, back like a cat. And when you feel like your pelvis is fairly stable, place your right ankle on your left thigh close to the knee, and your left foot flat on the wall. So it should be a very, very gentle stretch here in the unthreaded needle. You can scoot further from the wall to get your left foot comfortably placed. But let this be the subtlest of stretches here in the outer right hip that you can rest into for about a minute. Feel free to lean to the left or the right for nuance, but keep it on the mild side. Continue long and gentle breathing in and out through the nose when possible, as well as washing over your body with relaxation and a continuous flow. There are several other contributions to Buddhism that Patrul Rinpoche is credited with. One of the traditions he is credited with starting is the Rinpoche tradition, which was a non-sectarian approach to Buddhism. So at the time he lived, there were 4 traditions of Buddhism, the Nyingma being the oldest, and the Sakya, the Kagyu, and the Gelugpa. And he basically attempted to establish an order that saw beauty in all 4 of the traditions and didn't necessarily identify or commit to any one of them. It's called the Rinpoche tradition. He's also known with and credited with in the institutions where he was invited to come teach the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Bodhisattva-Charavatar, to convince the abbot of the monastery to stop doing special celebrations that used meat. So he inspired vegetarianism. One would think, isn't that a given? No, it was not. And even still, not the case. So if you are in the unthreaded needle with your left foot on the wall, consider straightening your left leg and resting it. And then your right foot next to the left. And in between sides, I'll recommend doing a little mini windshield wiper where your toes just go from side to side like this. When you're ready for round 2, place your left ankle on the right thigh close to the knee. And begin again. Might be a very different experience. However it happens to be, feel free to adjust your location from the wall so that it's on the mild side. Allow your long, gentle breathing to help you acclimate to the stretch. And even though it's your left hip that's probably feeling it the most, try to send the relaxation response to every part of your body, including your hands and your face. Just let it wash over everything in a continuous flow. It's even said that the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the Bodhisattva-Charavatar, at the time of Patrul Rinpoche's birth in 1808, it had pretty much fallen into obscurity. A 7th century text had become exceptionally rare. By the end of Patrul Rinpoche's life in 1887, however, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the Bodhisattva-Charavatar, was a standard text that every monastery in Tibet included in their studies. So a single man was responsible for taking the 7th century text from obscurity into being the equivalent of a bestseller, a classic. Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life was written by Shantideva, believed to live in the 7th century. And Shantideva admits right at the beginning of the book that no one probably needs to read this, that he's just doing it for himself. And if someone else finds benefit in reading his writings, well, that's great, but he wasn't expecting it. Very humble. When you're finally ready to release this side too, kindly straighten the right leg. And your left leg next to it. Feel free to settle into stillness, or perhaps windshield wiper if that feels good. Now it's time, one more pose. So kindly bend your knees, roll over to your favorite side, or one side if you don't have favorites, and lift up for our final resting posture called Shavasana. Here, I'll recommend the bolster to go underneath your knees, and the blanket can go underneath your head if you want that cushion again, or you can cover yourself with it if it's cool. So in Shavasana, try to drape your legs over the bolster, and this will help improve circulation to your lower back. Just like in the first pose, you're welcome to put the blanket underneath your head or not, or even roll it up if you want some extra cervical support. But as you're getting settled into the shape, try to eventually settle into stillness and help the process along with the long, gentle breathing through the nose and wave after wave of the relaxation response in a continuous flow. Try to do it for one more minute before you let go of the techniques and just simply rest. The Medicine Buddha mantra that I sang for you in the beginning, and we'll sing for you again, it's typically repeated 21 times. The 21 times is not arbitrary. It was chosen carefully. But that's generally how long it takes to get the mantra to repeat effortlessly, where you might just hear it without conjuring it up. So I will sing it for you 21 times. You can just rest. There's nothing you need to do for the next few minutes. If you want to receive the benefits of this rejuvenative, restorative practice, then please allow your body to be still and your mind to rest. Tadita umbe kanze be kanze maha be kanze hanza samungate soha. Tadita umbe kanze be kanze maha be kanze hanza samungate soha. Beganze, beganze, maha beganze, vanza samungate soa. Taryata beganze, beganze, maha beganze, vanza samungate soa. Taryata beganze, beganze, maha beganze, vanza samungate soa. Taryata beganze, beganze, maha beganze, vanza samungate soa. 베간제 베간제 마하베간제 란자 상가테 소하 다리타 베간제 베간제 마하베간제 란자 상가테 소하 베간제 베간제 마하베간제 안자상가테 소아 다리타 베간제 베간제 마하베간제 안자상가테 소아 베간제 베간제 마하베간제 란자 상가테 소아 타르타 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 Beganze, beganze, maha beganze, ranza samgate soa. Please allow your attention to return to the shape of your body, however it happens to be. As well as the breath, however it happens to be coming and going. When you're ready to invite movement again into your hands, fingers, legs, and feet, take your time to move gently, gradually up to a comfortable seat. No need to rush. The writings of Patrul Rinpoche were eventually collected, and you can read some of them. One is a letter to himself, where he's admitting his failures as a human being, but aspiring to be the best person that he could be. Another is the words of my perfect teacher, perhaps his most widely read work. And even if you don't agree with all of his metaphysics or the tradition that he came from, perhaps you might be inspired by his example to not just want the world to be a better place, but to walk the walk and lead by example. So I hope this time that you've spent practicing restorative yoga has been rejuvenative. And perhaps anytime you want to, you can sing the Medicine Buddha mantra, not just to slow down your breath, but perhaps to offer a gentle reminder to focus on what matters most. Namaste.